Welcome back to the Limit Factor. I'm Chad, and today we're going to finish up our install of the MeisterR Zeta CRD coilovers on our project car, the 2019 Mazda MX-5 Miata RF. So in our last video, we installed the front coilovers, and in this video, we are going to set up and install the rear coilovers. So the first step in our install is to go into the trunk, and we have to remove all of our carpeting. They're all attached by these little push pins, which you can pry out if you don't have a trim remover tool. You can pry out with a very small flathead screwdriver, or maybe even with your fingernails. We need to do that to get access to the top mounts of the OEM shocks and springs, which are located right behind here and right behind and above the wheel well on the passenger side. So I'm going to remove this plate just to give me better access. 3 nuts to remove over here, 10 millimeter, got my socket wrench. On the driver's side, there's this massive protective shielding here that I will be removing. 10 millimeter nuts that need to be removed. And again, now giving me access to the top of the shock mount here, and both driver and passenger side has 2 14 millimeter nuts. I'm going to go ahead and remove one and loosen the other so that there's only a couple threads holding it on. The next step is to disconnect the Endlink. You'll see here there's a bolt and nut at the top, and there's one at the bottom. This is a 14 millimeter. After disconnecting the Endlink, we're going to come over to the Bilstein shock spring assembly, and we're going to go down to the lower, there it is, the lower bolt here, which is 17 millimeter, and we're going to remove that. We removed the last 14 mil nut on the top of the strut mount and disconnected the end link, removed the bolt from the bottom of our shock mount. We are going to loosen, but do not remove, several of the bolts that make up the various arms of the rear suspension. And the reason for that is, one, it'll give us a little bit more clearance to pull down on the hub to remove the OE shock spring assembly, but also all these bolts have bushings. The bolt itself with the bushing is torqued to the OE ride height. And now that we're going to change that, we're going to loosen these all up and then put the car under load so that the bushings can be at the new ride height. So it doesn't put any undue wear on the bushings, or so I'm told. The logic makes sense to me. I am here. Why not, loosen these up and then put the hub itself, support the hub with the jack, take the pressure off, and then retighten all of these bolts to the spec with the new height, once we install our MeisterR coilovers. Sounds good. However, there's a ton of them. So let's count how many I'm going to loosen up. So we got this first arm right here. So there's one here. You follow this down here. We're going to have 2. We then have the arm down here. You got 3. Follow that up way in the back. Let's see if you can see that. 4. We then swap to the other side. The one I was showing you is 5 and 6. Then there's one in the back here, 7. And where that connects is right there. And then the one next to it, 9. And that comes out over in the back here at 10. So once we install the MeisterR coilover, we're then going to raise the hub with a jack and get it, relatively speaking, in place under load so that we remove the load from this jack stand. And then we're going to go back And for all 10 of these bolts, we're going to torque them down to spec. So I'm actually going to kick the bottom out towards the middle of the car. I have more clearance. Lower this and then pull it out from this way. Now that we got it out, why don't we do a quick weight comparison. The OEM shock spring assembly weighs 10.1 pounds and the MeisterR Zeta CRD weighs 8.7 pounds, so we do have some weight savings. Before we discard our OEM shock spring assembly, I want to just point out here that like the fronts, the rear has this plastic film that we want to transfer to the Zeta CRD. And as I do that, I'll wipe this down with a cloth just to clean off any of the dust or debris. So I'm going to feed this down and through, line the top 2 bolts up, and I will secure the top with the 2 14mm nuts that come with the MeisterR kit. We're going to cut off this bolt. This is just zip tied on. This came from MeisterR, and the reason for that is the OEM shock spring assembly, this nut on the OEM piece is actually welded on, so we can't reuse it. So it's nice that MeisterR gives this to you, but that means when you do reinsert the bolt that you'll be reusing, you got to make sure that you hold onto this so that this doesn't spin as you torque things down. Before I actually feed it through though, I think now is probably the best time to install the extensions. Simply attach by, let's see if you can see that. An Allen key will tighten this little screw to the top of it. So it is ready to go on the car. I'll feed this through the back here. I'll be reusing the OEM bolt. So I'll get the jack underneath here, raise it up, feed it through where these. The Endlink assembly, which you can see back there. We want to use our jack to support the hub and raise it up just enough so that we relieve the tension on our jack stand. So right now, I can't move this. I'm going to raise the jack just enough that it'll loosen this up. Once I do that, I'm going to go through and torque everything down, and I'll give you the torque specs. The torque specs that I'm pulling my information from is from hexercism.com, and I'll leave a link in the description below. There's a lot of discrepancies online, different YouTube videos given different torque specs, and quite frankly, I'm not sure exactly which ones are correct. I guess I have the most faith in what Hexercism has put out there. I bring this up because I would highly recommend that you do a little bit of research yourself and just think twice about which specs you're using. With that said though, let me go through the torque specs that I'll be using per Hexercism, starting with the 2 upper mount nuts. The spec range is between 34 and 40 foot-pounds. The torque specs for the Endlink, and by the way, I did loosen both of these to anywhere between 26 and 29 foot-pounds. Lower strut mount bolt. This bolt's torque spec is between 49 and 59 foot-pounds. And lastly, all 10 of these bolts that are at the end of each one of these arms, I will be torquing those down to 55 foot-pounds. One thing I want to emphasize is that although we are loosening all of these nuts and bolts at the end of each one of these linkages, we're loosening these because they have bushings on them, and we're relieving the tension on the bushing and retorquing them to spec based on the new ride height for our new MeisterR coilover. Now, that's great and all. However, some of these nuts and bolts will impact your alignment, which to me personally is okay because we've already changed our alignment by installing these coilovers. After things settle, I am going to go get a performance alignment. I highly recommend you do the same. Whether it's coilovers or lowering springs, you will change your alignment on your car, and you need to bring it back within spec. So for those of you who are going to have issue with loosening and retorquing some of these bushings, that's fine. I totally get it. You're absolutely right. It is going to throw my alignment out of spec, but we've already done that. And those will be addressed once I have the performance alignment done, not by me, but by a professional shop. We are so close to being done. So we have the coilovers installed. All we need to do is clean up the trunk, and don't wait. This is one of those things, if I don't do now and I just throw in the carpeting and don't fix the clips and everything, I'm going to leave it in here, and it'll probably be a month before I actually go in and do it. So before I drop the car, and I recommend before you drop the car off of the jack stands, reattach all the carpeting. I have to say, putting back the carpeting and putting in place all of those push pins or clips or whatever you want to call it took a lot longer than I expected. My recommendation is to take a picture or a video, use your phone, of what the carpeting looks like before you start removing it. That way, as you put it back in, you know what pieces overlap other pieces, which ones go in first, etc. Yep. Everything's in place, looks good. Do not have to cut anything as far as getting access to the extensions, which is nice. They just poke out a little bit here, just enough. Actually, we're almost there. We're so close. When I put the wheels back on the car, I hand tighten the lug nuts. I don't torque them down. I hand tighten them. I put the lug nuts on in a star pattern, and then I lower the car all the way to the ground, get the weight of the car on all four wheels, and then I torque the lug nuts down. And the torque spec that I will be using will be 85 foot-pounds. In addition to that, as I was lowering the car, now that the car has been lowered due to the coilovers, I would not be able to simply lower the car with my floor jack because I would trap my floor jack underneath the car. So what I had to do, which was easy for me because I have this, I have ramps. So I had to lower the car onto the ramps, and then I backed the car off of the ramps. No problem. But if you don't have ramps, keep that in mind, that as you lower your car, you may trap your floor jack underneath it. So put something underneath the tires that is secure, that can support the weight, so that you can then roll the car off of whatever you put. Maybe I am going to let the car settle for a couple days. I'm going to take the measurements. I am going to finally enjoy the car, see what I think of it. Remember though, we still need to get an alignment, so I'm not going to make my full decision or give you my feedback until I have a proper alignment done. But if you're not subscribed, subscribe, because the next video or two, I will give you my feedback. I'll let you know how easy it is to adjust the damping on this car, see if I can find that perfect setting for me. So this has taken a lot of work. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad I'm able to finally, hopefully enjoy this. But thank you for watching, and until next time.